Super Smash Bros. Brawl has quite the interesting reputation. Released in 2008 for the Nintendo Wii, this would be the follow-up to Super Smash Bros. Melee, released on the GameCube prior. You see, back in 1999, the original Super Smash Bros. Was released for the Nintendo 64. Then, only a mere 2 years later in 2001, Melee was released. Meaning Smash Bros. Brawl had 7 years to perfect upon the previous formula, whereas Melee only had 2. This fact right here is what caused the fandom to divide upon Brawl's release. There really is no general consensus surrounding Brawl, mainly due to how it seems like half of the fans love it, while the other fans view it as a slower, less original title than Melee. And while I can get behind both of these arguments, personally, I feel as though Super Smash Bros. Brawl is a great game, taking most aspects of Melee and molding it into its own unique experience. So let's get into why this game is so divisive among fans, and why I believe it to be severely underrated. As stated earlier, Smash Bros. Brawl was released on the Wii, which naturally meant that it would come with a few different ways to play. You could either play with the Wii Remote on its side, or by using the nunchuck and the Wii Remote in an upright position. The moveset here is exactly how it was in the previous two entries, only now there are a few more notable additions, most of which involve the refinement of the controls. For example, grabbing onto a ledge is much more accurate now, as your player will almost always grab on whenever they are close enough, as opposed to how janky it was in Melee. There's also the addition of the assist trophy and final smashes, both of which were introduced in this title. The assist trophies summon a random object or character which aids whoever picked the assist trophy up. These cause utter chaos, especially when playing with 3 or 4 players. I know lots of people turn these off when playing competitively, or even with just their friends, but I've always loved these as I feel like they're one of the key aspects which separate Smash Bros. From other fighting games. If you'll notice, Melee felt a lot more competitive due to how it mostly required skill to win, rather than luck, and perhaps it's the single biggest reason lots of people choose Melee over Brawl. The final smashes are another amazing feature. These actually amp up the competition in such a way that it becomes incredibly satisfying to break open the smash ball and gain the ability to use your final smash. Each character possesses some sort of deadly blow which either does massive damage or takes your opponent out instantly. Unfortunately, lots of the final smashes in Brawl just aren't that great, especially when you consider what we got in Ultimate. But this is the first game these appear in, so I won't be too harsh on them. It just felt like they should have been much more powerful here, but oh well. Super Smash Bros. Brawl also contains much more characters than either 64 or Melee, while simultaneously trimming much of the fat from those earlier games. For example, most of the Echo Fighters and palette swaps such as Dr. Mario, Pichu, and Young Link were removed in order to make room for some more unique characters, and while I do love playing as Young Link, I think they made a good call by doing this, as Brawl was able to bring in so many unique characters due to the space made available from sidelining the others. In fact, Brawl was the first game to introduce Sonic into the series, which absolutely blew people's minds at the time, as there had been constant rumors for years on end that you could secretly unlock Sonic and Tails in Melee by performing some elaborate method which was obviously fake and just another beautiful case of pre-internet rumors. But Sonic wasn't the only character brought in from another franchise. Snake from Metal Gear was also introduced, showing to the world that Nintendo was in fact willing to pull in other characters that weren't from their own franchises. This decision would ultimately pave the way for the absolutely monstrous roster of Smash Ultimate, released a decade later. And can I just say, I've always loved the silhouettes of each challenger whenever you're given the chance to fight them. It's so mysterious, and if it's your first time playing, trying to figure out who the character is just by their shadowy figure is tons of fun. Unlike in Melee, unlocking a fighter is quite easy this time around, as they automatically appear to you after playing a certain amount of matches. Then, all you have to do is simply defeat them in order to unlock them, which feels great to do every time. On top of adding a ton of brand new unique characters, Super Smash Bros. Brawl also includes a few extra modes, all of which are very enjoyable in their own right. Classic mode, which was brought back from Melee, functions in much of the same ways it did previously, only this time, things are spruced up quite heavily. While in Melee, there is only one type of battle fought on a set stage, Brawl mixes things up by changing up one of the many attributes contributing to the fight. This could be something like fighting a giant version of a set character, fighting multiple clones, fighting a metal character, and so on. This makes things far more enjoyable than just playing through a nearly identical line of opponents each time like it was back in Melee. And of course, once making it to the end you face off against Master Hand, which has always been such a cool boss fight to me. You're literally fighting against a giant dismembered glove, which is super random, and I don't know how or why Nintendo thought of this, but it's still very enjoyable to fight since it has such a variety of different attacks, like finger lasers, slaps, and punches. I also love how upon defeating him, your character turns into a trophy, and the more characters you beat Classic Mode with, the more trophies you get. Alongside Classic Mode, there is the Stadium, which includes 3 different minigames, those being Target Smash, Home Run Contest, and Multi-Man Brawl. Target Smash is a minigame taken directly from Classic Mode, where you must simply break all the targets before the timer runs out. This one's okay in my opinion. It's always been on the more boring side of things when it comes to minigames, but the other 2 are much better. Home Run Contest sees you inflicting as much damage as possible onto this poor heavy bag before whacking it away with the bat. This one is super addicting as it's fun to try and beat your previous score. It's especially fun when you have friends to compete with in this mode. Lastly, there's Multi-Man Brawl. This one is pretty fun, albeit very forgettable. The only objective is to defeat every enemy on screen, and due to these all flying away so easily, using a character such as Donkey Kong is a ton of fun since you can wreak utter madness upon the stage. But overall, that's it for the Stadium side mode. But of course, you cannot talk about Brawl without talking about the Subspace Emissary. This is basically the game's campaign mode, as it most certainly doesn't classify as a mere side mode. This alone can take hours upon hours to complete, and honestly, probably could have been sold as a completely separate game acting as a spin-off to Brawl. But no, we were lucky enough to receive this absolutely fantastic mode alongside the main game itself. So what exactly is a Subspace Emissary? Well, the main objective here is to make it through the end of a stage, all the while fighting numerous different enemies, all of which are completely different from anything else we've ever seen in the franchise. Everything here is incredibly distinct from one another and all possess a very memorable design. Along with that, there's usually a boss fight at the end of each stage, which could literally be anything from any of Nintendo's franchises. I mean, you could literally fight Rayquaza and Porky, which you could never do in any other Smash Bros. Game, that's for sure. The story here is also incredibly cool, especially for a Nintendo game. Throughout the game, you'll encounter antagonists such as Wario and King Dedede. Their goal is to turn the protagonists into trophies. The reason this works so well is because of the interesting dynamic it brings along with it. In this mode, you get to fight alongside characters from completely different franchises such as Pit and Mario or Link and Yoshi. Seeing these characters partner up makes room for some of the most unique interactions in the entire series, and the cutscenes themselves are so great if you watch them all in order, it essentially forms a movie told brilliantly without any dialogue at all. Brawl also has a reputation of looking very gritty, as each character looks as though they've been through war, and they all act way more serious than they normally do. This works unbelievably well in the Subspace Emissary, as the way every fighter goes about handling a dire situation feels very natural, as opposed to being jarring if the game had a more cutesy art style. That's another thing I never really got. I just don't understand how some people can hate this art style so much. I mean, I get that it hasn't necessarily aged the best, but in my opinion, it's still very memorable due to how different it is from the rest of the series. This was also a one and done thing, as we haven't seen this art style or direction return in any of the games which followed Brawl. However, one thing that is unanimously praised about this entry is its soundtrack. Now, it is no secret that every Smash Bros. Game carries along with it an absolutely fantastic soundtrack, but to me, Brawl just hits in a different way. I think Ultimate is the only one that matches up to Brawl, as this soundtrack is nothing short of stunning. Everything from the main theme to the music used in the levels and separate game modes is genius, and one of the reasons this entry is remembered so fondly is strictly due to its superb soundtrack. This game introduced some of the most famous tunes into the franchise and helped create an experience truly worthy of being called a masterpiece. So in the end, Super Smash Bros. Brawl is a game which has seen quite the rollercoaster of emotions from the fanbase. It's often overshadowed by its more popular predecessor, and I just don't think it's fair to judge this game based off of any of the others in the series. They clearly tried to do something new with Brawl, and for that I respect that era of Nintendo greatly. At the time, they consistently strived to vastly change at least one aspect of a new game releasing in the franchise. Take Majora's Mask for example. This game was different from Ocarina of Time in every conceivable way, but that didn't stop millions of fans from loving every second of it. And it even got to the point where many actually prefer Majora's Mask to its predecessor. Overall, I think it was a good thing Nintendo steered away from Brawl's more unique tone for the future entries, as having only one game like this makes it stand out more, and in turn, this is a much more special Smash Bros. Game because of it. But with all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.